Like I said, my name's Jake Craven. I work for a company called Singular DTV. What we are is we're a blockchain entertainment studio. So what that looks like in terms of what we do day to day is we kind of operate as almost two different companies under one umbrella. One side to us is a film studio, and that we're producing, financing, acquiring, distributing our own slate of original content. That's film, TV, episodic stuff, short form, music, podcasts, whole range of just creative content that we develop ourselves. And then the other side to us is that we are a tech startup and focus on building a suite of different applications that each address a different pain point in the entertainment industry using blockchain technology. So really trying to take all the things that were talked about this morning and directly apply them to create solutions for different entertainment rights holders, companies, creators, things like that. The core goal for us in everything that we do is how do we create more transparency, more sustainability, and more efficiency in the entertainment industry. An industry that is notoriously void in all three of those areas. So here's just a very top line breakdown of some of our key applications that we have and are building. We have, like I said, the core goal is supporting creators and rights holders. So we have our rights management tool. We call it Token. This is the thing that allows anyone to tokenize themselves. So the conversation that we had that Manuel brought up in terms of allowing people to tokenize their projects or their libraries or their companies, we have an application that allows anyone to go and tokenize themselves. So we've had musicians tokenize themselves, we have films that are tokenized, and really any project that we work with, we are creating a digital token for. So I know this was already used a whole bunch, but just a quick definition from my standpoint of what tokenization means. It's really just a way for the rights holders to utilize the blockchain to automate and streamline the management and collection and distribution of royalties and revenue. So Token, sort of, if you think about it, one aspect of that platform is it is a crowdfunding tool, depending on where you are in the world and the regulatory landscape. And so we have filmmakers in Hong Kong, in Guatemala, in Spain, that have tokenized their projects and used it to crowdfund to raise the money for it. But it's also used for traditional investors. If you think funding organizations, studios, or just private investors, which in the States is our primary method of getting films financed, they are able to utilize Token so they get more transparency and can have a greater sense of where the revenue is coming and going from the films that they're financing, but also be able to participate in the success much faster and more efficiently. So they're not chasing anyone down for statements and payment when there are overages or things like that. And the other tools, we have a equipment crew rental application called Rentalist that's currently in beta right now in New York City. We're launching what we call DDP. It's our distribution platform. So a front-end consumer-facing digital distribution platform. I think for film, probably films will be released in more of a transactional capacity to launch. And so I think iTunes, and why this is important is that the distribution platform feeds into the ecosystem because the revenue collected from sales generated on our platform funnel automatically back into that token that is created for the project or that the rights holders have created. Let's say you have a library of hundreds of films and can release them anywhere in the world via our platform. So then revenue generated automatically flows back. And where the blockchain comes in is because we are recording every transaction. So I download a film, I rent a film, that transaction is recorded on the blockchain. So we are an Ethereum company, so it's the Ethereum blockchain where it's recorded. What that means is that even if I tried to hide those numbers or not share that data about who was watching a film or when, the filmmaker and the rights holder could still go and find out exactly how much money is being generated in real time. So it allows for real-time reporting of sales and distribution data. It also allows for near real-time distribution of the sales revenue back to the participants. And this goes back to, sorry, I'm getting into the weeds before I should. And so then we also have our artist portal, which is the sort of back-end admin side that allows any creator to go and manage, sort of see where the revenue is, access that data, export any royalty report statements, upload new content, and things like that. So that's kind of the broad ecosystem, and of course there's a whole bunch of other and additional applications that we're building. One of the things that I would stress is for us, we are really positioning ourselves to be leaders in the sort of blockchain entertainment space globally. We are a global company, so we are a Swiss GmbH. We are also a tokenized company, so we ourselves tokenized ourselves, Singular DTV, in 2016, and that's what gave us the startup capital to get the company off the ground. And so we sold our token to the public, and that allowed us to get things going and to start building these different applications. So just to give top line in terms of pain points and what we're trying to address here, right? If you'd say traditional, this is a map of kind of the traditional studio model or legacy film distribution model, where you have the three key players, or the three legs of the stool: the creators, the financiers, and then the audience. Or you can also say the distributors in the audience. And every piece of data, every transaction has to pass through intermediaries. So the filmmakers very rarely know who their audience is. If you're watching a film on iTunes, the filmmaker doesn't have any sense of who you are. Or the extreme scenario is you watch a film on Netflix, Netflix doesn't share any data as to who's consuming and watching those films. So filmmakers don't even know how many people have watched their film on Netflix. And then if you're an investor, similarly, or you're a funding organization, you don't have that data. You don't really know how the money that you put into a project is really being utilized and what that's generating outside of actually getting to watch a completed film and feeling satisfied that the film is up to your standards and your sort of mission statement, or what you have to do by whatever your funding organization. So what we're trying to do is create an ecosystem where all of these three legs of the stool can operate and connect in a very seamless sort of peer-to-peer way. So creators have a greater connection with the audience, and the investors and financiers have a more streamlined connection with the creators, and then also the audiences as well. So they know who is actually watching those films. But then through tokenization, where let's say I financed 50% of a film, company B financed the other 50%, we would create a digital token that represents that film. And this is not something that's public for the sale. It's not something that we're trying to raise money off of. But we would create that token, and 50% of those tokens, so it's a digital object, right? So we would create 100 of them, and they each are tied to a unique address. So 50 of the 100 would go to me. The other 50 go to the other financier. So when someone pays to watch the film, let's say someone goes to see it in theaters or someone downloads it online, that revenue enters into our tools and our applications that we are building. And through this is sort of the application of what we call a smart contract that was brought up earlier, the revenue from those rights or from that exploitation is automatically distributed in accordance with the waterfall that we've agreed to. So 50% goes to me, 50% goes to the other financier or the other investor. So that's why when we say that this ecosystem creates a more streamlined connection between creators and investors, it's providing that transparency and more efficiency or a more efficient revenue distribution process. It allows investors, and like I said, it's different when I'm talking about this in the States because we're primarily talking about private individuals, but in Europe or in Canada, we're talking a lot about government and sort of organizational financiers. There's the more that they are able to see how the film is doing, how many people are watching it, where the revenue is coming from, the more comfortable they will feel with the next project. And the more data they can share to their other partners or other investors, let's say if it's a fund, in terms of seeing how their money is actually being turned around. And when I say the greater connection between creators and audience, how I like to apply this is in relation to marketing campaigns. So my background has always been as an independent distributor in using technology to try and create more efficiency in film distribution. And I've released films on iTunes, and I have a certain budget to market that film. And I try to be very efficient with my marketing campaigns, right? I want to know what my conversion rate is. I want to know what my return on investment is for every dollar I'm spending on a film. The problem is that with iTunes, you're not getting data as to what the actual revenue generated from your campaign is for 30, 60 days, 90 days sometimes. So how am I supposed to run a smart and efficient marketing campaign if I can't figure out what the conversion rate is into sales from the money I'm spending on the marketing campaign? And that, to me, is one of the biggest pain points in terms of independent film and film distribution, is the current platform setup in the traditional world makes it very difficult to be efficient and smart with how the limited funds we have to spend are spent on films. If you think anyone who runs marketing outs for a traditional industry, let's say just retail, nobody would accept not knowing what their ROI is and their conversion rates are, in near real time or on a weekly basis. But in the film world, we've accepted that because that's what the platforms have required us to do. That's just what they're willing to provide in terms of data. So what we are trying to do is create that seamless sort of peer-to-peer connection between audiences and the creators, in that the creators know automatically who's buying their films and where. Now, they don't necessarily know the names of the people, but they have a whole sort of flood of data that they're getting every time someone watches a film, and that data is shared with them automatically. So here's just kind of big top-line breakdown in terms of some of the key value points that we really focus on and that we see our applications driving. And again, this goes back to some of the things that I've just mentioned, but creating a digital supply chain from creator to consumer. And so using tokenization to track the life of a project from the very beginning of the financing stage all the way through to digital distribution, and allowing all of the information and the transactions and interactions to be logged into that token and on the blockchain. So if you're the rights holder, if you're the investor, you have a very clear picture of everything that's going on with the film from beginning to end. The other is, like I said, empowering creators, and that our tool, Toget, depending on where you are, is used as a crowdfunding application. And so allowing artists to tokenize themselves, so taking their intellectual property, if you will, and embedding that in a digital token and selling that to the public to raise funds to create their projects more autonomously. And then the individuals who supported them and backed that campaign, they're not just benefiting and participating in the success of one project, but potentially in the whole career that the creator is having. We had a musician in Switzerland, a DJ called Grammatic, that tokenized himself in 2017. And I think he raised about $2 million in 24 hours. And the core there is that tokenization allows him to create more music and albums and concert films and things like that, and give all of that content back to his audience for free. So they're effectively pre-buying his music for the rest of his career, but it allows him as an EDM musician to not have to spend all of his time on tour, right? Because now he has more freedom to be able to actually spend time creating his next album or making more music videos and things like that. So we, like I said, also have films that have been tokenized. We have the front-end consumer-facing side, but also the very core thing, and this is when I say that we're really trying to establish ourselves as a leader in terms of the blockchain entertainment world. So if you're thinking entertainment and blockchain, we say come talk to us because we're building applications all across the board, and tokenization is not just for public funding and sale. Any project, as was mentioned earlier, or a catalog or a library can technically be tokenized and not encounter any regulatory issues because it's just for the accounting management and the rights management on the back end. It's not something where there's a public sale of these digital tokens to the public. It's very much looking just purely at rights, revenue, royalty management on the back end. Yeah, like I said, big aspect is just enabling transparent financial reporting. Like I mentioned just before lunch, when I say transparency, we're not necessarily saying, to the public, $100 went to filmmaker A. What we're saying is, if you are that filmmaker, you have the information so that you can go at any point in time and look and see what the sort of revenue is from your film. That's that level of transparency, but if I were just a general consumer, it would be near impossible for me to figure out how to actually find out which transactions are tied to any individual person because it's all done by numerical IDs and codes. But Singularity TV, we believe in public blockchains, and what that means to me, and this is going back to transparency, is that basically what I'd say is any company can choose to be transparent. Apple, Netflix, Amazon, they can choose to be as transparent as they want. There's nothing stopping anyone from doing that. But they also are really at the whim of their private investors and their board of directors and just their corporate decisions, and choose to not be completely transparent with everything. So by being a blockchain-enabled studio, what we're doing is coding transparency into the DNA of everything that we do. So it doesn't matter who the CEO of Singularity TV is 10 years from now, that transparency for the rights holders and the participants is embedded into everything, into the core DNA of what we do. So there won't be a point down the road 10 years from now where all of a sudden we decide, you know what, let's take back that consumer data because we don't want to share who's actually watching films and when. We are building something that will allow that ongoing from here on out. And so, again, that's sort of when we talk about enabling transparency and why blockchain is necessary for that. That's why. It's not just saying, we're doing this because we want to. It's we have to, as a company, be transparent because it's built into the DNA of the applications that we're building. So when we say that we're building applications using blockchain, what that means is that whenever a transaction or whenever something takes place, it is recorded on the public blockchain, the Ethereum blockchain. So to the consumer-facing side, there's a normal application front end that they use. For our distribution platform, the DDP, the name is changing. That's not the the name of the platform just yet. It's a placeholder, because that'd be a terrible name for a distribution platform. Any consumer can download or rent a film using credit card or digital currency if they wanted, but they can use just normal currency. I don't want to say normal because that's the wrong tone for this event. Just traditional currencies. And so to the front end user, the person watching the film, it's no different than anything else that they're used to in terms of watching a film. But all of the blockchain aspects operate on the back end. So the revenue and the reporting, like I said, it benefits from all of that. But to the front end, to the filmmakers, because we have our artist portal, so to the rights holders, again, they're not even noticing that big of a difference. What we say, it's sort of, we're building our tools, and where we're coming into is, and what we're doing is in the same way that email harnessed the internet, in a way that none of us have to understand how the code behind email actually works to be able to benefit from it. But we just know that it works, and then when an email bounces, we get that weird mailer daemon email that has all those lines of code, and you don't really know what that is. What we're doing is building applications that allow anyone in the entertainment or the creative ecosystem or economy to utilize blockchain to address their pain points as a business and as a company. This ranges from private film funds to public film funds to libraries and archives and catalogs. It ranges across film, music, TV, ebooks, podcasts, the whole range of sort of creative content that has a digital life. We can provide or create a unique solution for that. And that's really a lot of the partnerships that we're doing and a lot of the initiatives that we undertake. But to go back to just, I want to try to provide concrete case studies. Like I mentioned, we are a film studio. We are tokenized. So what that means is that us as a company, Singularity TV, raised funds via a public token sale. So every project that we create as a studio is tokenized, and the revenue distribution and the waterfall is handled via the tokenomics, if we will. So these tokens automate and streamline the distribution of overages and royalties to the different participants, the directors, producers, studios, the investors, things like that. And we actually have our first film as a studio premiering, well, it's opening in theaters in the US this week on Friday. Wow. And then it's premiering festival actually at Black Nights. And this is a documentary about blockchain and the specific applications of blockchain outside of just the entertainment world. And since it's playing at Black Nights in 2 weeks, I figured we'd show the teaser for it, just so you guys can see it.
With the internet We're not really the users, we're not really the customers, we're the product. But blockchain says it's another way, there's another way.
Blockchain, it's still an experiment in process.
In Africa, now we think about money in a very different way.
In this refugee camp, in this supermarket, all the transactions are authorized and recorded on a blockchain network.
I believe in the power of blockchain.
Open source technology like blockchain is exactly what hackers had envisioned from the beginning.
Are you a hacker?
Yeah, I describe myself as a hacker. Blockchain is going to scare the shit out of some very powerful people.
Blockchain is just a scam.
A lot of this stuff is going to go away.
It doesn't serve any useful function.
A fraud.
What we're trying to stop is simple. We're trying to stop the abuse of power.
Okay, so yeah, I don't want to. I can go on forever. Do you guys have any questions? Yes.
The technology likely to have the greatest impact on the next few decades has arrived.
Yeah,
And
no,
it's
we
not
still
social
register
media, it's not
intellectual
big data,
property,
it's
traditional
not robotics,
ways.
it's not
What
even
I like
AI.
to say is that as a company, we are straddling the line between the traditional entertainment ecosystem and this new technology. So we're not trying to say this is the way to do it, don't do the traditional stuff, because there is a purpose for it and there is value. But what we're trying to do is allow for the new technology to, and the value that we're bringing through this technology to make itself apparent and for people to see that. We like to say that instead of driving a revolution, this is an evolution. So it's still in the US copywriting a film, right? And doing via that mechanism because there is a purpose for that and there is a place for it. This is more a way to just add additional efficiency and sustainability on top of the existing ecosystem. In the same way that our film, Trust Machine, is still gonna open in theaters and will be distributed across traditional video on demand platforms, but for the rights and revenue management, that will happen via the tokens. So all the revenue collected across different windows of release will funnel into the digital tokens, but we will also have our platform and side by side. So the core opportunity there in the case study is to show what the benefits were in terms of increased speed of payment and access to data on our platform side by side with the other distribution platforms. Not necessarily saying we only want things to be released on our platform because that starts getting into consumer habits and trying to change consumer habits. You know, we really want to work in a way that's seamless. That was a really long-winded answer to your question. But hopefully that's helpful. Any other questions? Yeah. What?
Okay, I have two questions. Let's talk about ICOs or the tokenization of ICOs. So say me and Helen, who we produced films together for quite a while. So, you know, how would that process with, you know, I need money. I think most of the people here there are like some startups and VR startups and content startups and etc. here. You know, how the process would, you know, work. Can you give us like a success story or for example, talk about the Swiss experience?
Yeah, so like I said, we have our application Tokit, and this is up and running and has been utilized by creators across a number of different genres and all over the world. And this is a tool that enables a creator, of course, depending on regulations, to launch a token generation event. So it's the tokenized version of an ICO. We just use this different nomenclature. And what they're doing is creating a certain number of digital tokens. So let's say they need to raise $100,000 euro. Well, they would then create, let's say they created 500,000 tokens for X film. So they would then sell to the public a certain portion of those tokens and then keep for themselves another portion. So you're creating what is effectively an investor pool or just a pool for public sale and then making that available to the public to purchase. And so they're purchasing the token, and what you get in return is what you use to finance that film. So they're still evolving in terms of regulations, but what we know is that in the States, accredited investors are able to participate in this. So high net worth individuals, and this is something that any traditional financing mechanism or funders can participate in and tokenize projects. So when they fund something, it can be tokenized. So the public isn't necessarily buying the tokens, but the investor is getting tokens tied to the amount of revenue or amount of the funding or the total funding pool that they're created. So what tokenization allows us to do is you can then say 20% we're gonna sell to the public, 20% we're gonna make available to private high net worth individuals or investors. And so you can break it up and sort of take a strategy that's akin to sort of traditional and fundraising strategies. But it's all through the sale of this digital token that will then stay with the film over the entire life of the film.
But who sells them? Do you sell them or the person sells them? So, let's run a sort of a ICO for dummies.
So yeah, so what happens is our application, Tokit, it has a few things built into it that are key for this. So when we're talking about blockchain, we're talking about digital tokens. What does that mean for you as a person, right, or as a company? What that means is that you're creating a digital wallet that has a unique ID address. So if I want to support a filmmaker, I would go to Tokit and see the Tokit page for a project, and I would say, I want to commit X number of dollars or X number of Ether, digital coin, to this campaign. And I would then link up my wallet and send them Ether, if you will. Or if, let's say, I'm creating a film and I have an investor who's paying me $1,000 and I need to then send them tokens in basically for that exchange, I would then send those tokens to their digital wallet. And so our application has a digital wallet associated with it. So you can go there, create a wallet, and then have those tokens deposited into your wallet. So what that means then is when the film is distributed and revenue is generated from it, you don't have to do anything other than sit there and the revenue will flow into your digital wallet. So it's automatically there because you have 10, 20 tokens in your digital wallet. Sorry, it's still, I know it's still very, like for me, it still takes a long time to kind of wrap my head around what that looks like. But if you think of a digital wallet as like your whatever online bank account, that's effectively what the digital wallet is. And so instead of adding a new credit card to your bank account, you are adding basically a bucket of tokens. So you're adding different types of tokens, or let's say different assets into that digital wallet or account that you can then log on to and access in real time.
I'm not leaving you alone.
That's okay.
I'm gonna have more. How much does this, well, another question. So if you look at like ICOs, there's been a few in Estonia as well.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the creator the creator is responsible in that situation, right? Because it's or the distributor, right? You can license a film to a distributor, and the film might not generate any revenue, right? We're not changing the economic realities of funding films. What we're doing is just creating tools that make that more efficient. Well, I think our concern is less. If no film were to ever generate any revenue, then yeah, we would be in a bad situation. iTunes would be in a bad situation. Apple would be in Amazon would be in a bad situation. I think the part of the question is not necessarily is it generating revenue. Is it generating overages and net revenue, even though it's dangerous to say net in the film industry, because there's no such thing as a net receipts in film. But is the film profitable? That's a whole other conversation, and a whole other context.
So you said that your film is going to be coming out in theaters in the U.S. So the theaters there, they will transfer the profits to the distributor in normal currency. Then the distributor will transfer it to you, your share, in normal currency, and then you put it on Token.io, or how does it work?
Yeah. So. Exactly. There's always going to be a level of, as the creator, as the investor, making sure that the revenue comes to you in the form that you want, right? So your royalties coming in the form that you want. Singular DTV, we are our own distributor. So I booked the film in theaters in Los Angeles and New York. I will then collect the revenue from those sales in dollars, right, in fiat, that the traditional way that theaters pay you out. And then we will convert those dollars into a digital currency and send them to the address that is tied to the token for Trust Machine for the film. So that's the technical of how it would work. It's really just taking a few clicks at that point. But that's fundamentally what we're doing, is we're taking this revenue, what we would call off-chain revenue, and then manually adding it in to the token. But that's why when we go back to sort of what we're doing as a company and the ecosystem we're building, one of those key aspects is our digital distribution platform. So the distribution platform is tied to Tokit, so revenue that comes in via our back-end tech and how we're building everything, if we're collecting dollars and credit cards, right, or just traditional currency and digital currency, it's automatically doing the transferring or the converting and funneling it along to the token via Token.io to the rights holders. But it's doing that automatically. So it's within our ecosystem.
So so I get back tokens, right? You get dollars, you put it in Token.io, and then on my account as an investor, I land tokens.
So if you're a participant, let's say you're an actor and you're owed 10% of the back end, then you would get paid out whatever that amount is owed to you right now in Ether. So the digital coin that can then quickly be converted into dollars. And so part of what we're doing is building out the tools to make that super simple, and that's just a few clicks. But where this becomes interesting is if you have a catalog of 100 films, it allows for all of that revenue from across all of those films to flow to you automatically as well into one location. And so then you can easily export and deposit the revenue from all of those projects all at the same time. But it's still, the key, and this is a key aspect when we talk about tokenization, is that still, the revenue still has to flow via a digital currency for it to be immediate and streamlined and efficient. It doesn't work with just sending dollars to people, because then you're using traditional payment gateways and you're not actually changing anything or fixing anything.
One more. So I wanted to really get to like raising money. So, you know, you said on the Swiss artist it took about like 2 weeks to get it up, and you know, in Estonia we know that if you want to run an ICO, you have to provide a white paper and it needs to be public and etc. etc. So do you do the job for them, or they basically have to prep that stuff? Because you know that's actually I think the complicated part, where you have to like figure stuff out.
Yeah, so there's a few things that our platform does. One of the things that happens when you're doing fundraising is, and this is just how the regulatory landscape in it, and it's still evolving and changing every day. But there's an aspect called know your consumer. So you have to, if I want to finance or support something, I need to provide a certain amount of information about myself to the platform that addresses these sort of like AML issues. That's what we call KYC addresses AML, and it's too many terms of art for one sentence. But the know your consumer process and how that's built out and how that has to happen for you to be able to fund a project is built into our platform. You know, we as a platform aren't able to provide financial advice or legal advice, but what we do is just always, you know, recommend that people talk to attorneys who are experienced in this to help them out, and to use different tools or templates. And it's all relative to what exactly they're trying to raise as well. Because
so give us a few examples.
Well, if you're a independent filmmaker in Guatemala and you're raising funds to make a sci-fi feature and you need $50,000 US, you know, what you're putting together as the quote-unquote white paper isn't this extensive technical document about how you're going to build all these tools. What you're providing is what you would traditionally provide when you're raising funds for a film, a lookbook, probably a video with, you know, some of your past work, and, you know, maybe a breakdown of the story and what the budget is and how you're going to utilize that budget effectively. In that sense, it's very similar to traditional crowdfunding via Kickstarter and Indiegogo. You know, the information that you provide is really all relative to the appetite of the consumers or the potential funders and what they need to see. But because when you're talking about an entertainment project, it's very straightforward, right? There's not a lot of explanation you have to do when you say you're producing a film. It's very clear, or producing an album. Anyone can very clearly understand what you mean by that. And then what your objective and what your timeline is also a lot easier to break down, as opposed to I'm building this, you know, IoT solution and need to raise $100 million. But to your point, Singularity TV, we did our token sale, our public fundraising event in 2016. The regulatory landscape was very different in 2016 than it is now. So we, as a company, we don't like to say that we have a white paper. What we have is a sort of statement of purpose and a larger document that is more of a living document and breathing, because where we were in 2016 is very different from where we are now. Our goals as a company are different. We've evolved. The realities have also expanded what we're able to do as a company. So to hold ourselves to a static white paper from 4 years ago doesn't make sense. Now, we're not doing this to avoid commitments. We made a core set of promises when we raised funds to launch our company. Those four were: one, launching a tokenization and rights management tool, Tokit, that's up. The other was a digital distribution platform, a peer-to-peer digital distribution platform, and that's the DDP that we're launching, and so that's going. The other was a blockchain documentary, and so that's opening in theaters. And then the fourth promise was a sci-fi series, which is currently in development. So we are very clear about what that is, but we also are taking an approach that's realistic for any startup because how can you be an agile startup if you're beholden to a document you created 4 years ago, when in the life of a startup, even if you're still around 2 years later, that's a marvel in itself in the startup world. But you definitely will have changed. So we take a little bit of a different approach, but the core thing for us is we are always active in terms of transparency and efficiency and making sure that we are sort of ahead of the game. So like what was mentioned earlier in terms of if you're interested and you're not sure about the regulatory issues, talk to an attorney. If you are concerned about how the regulations are evolving, be ahead of the game. For us, we're ahead of the game in that we are actively talking to the regulatory agencies to influence how they're making decisions about this, because we know that our tools and what we're doing as a company is honest and transparent and actually being built. We're not abusing people's funds. So what we are doing is using ourselves as an example for when it goes right and how regulations should be built out. And so we're really proactive in that sense. And that's how anyone should be.
Yeah, Jack, maybe a last question, I guess. But when you're tokenizing and when you're raising funds, so what is the incentive for the general public to invest? I mean, because they become investors, right? Or is it not recognized as a security, so an investment for the general public? Is it or is it not?
No, so
and in a way, what is the incentive? Because when you raise money from the general public, you promise kind of revenue or benefits.
So you have to be realistic in terms of if you're raising funds for a film, what you are presenting to them in terms of the realistic economic opportunities of that film. But what we are able to do is sort of what we call rights or a revenue rewards token. So that's very straightforward in that based on what percentage of the total tokens you've launched, you would get when sort of, let's say we build the waterfall, so we have to recoup X number of revenue, X number of gross revenue to recoup the costs, and then overages, the adjusted gross or net or whatever, then flows to participants into the waterfall. So the system would then automatically distribute that revenue to you as the token holder in accordance with the revenue rewards contract that we've built. So what that means is that you are participating in the success of the project based on how much revenue is generated by the film.
I have last question. It's actually a very practical question that's been annoying me since Cannes this year, where there was a lot of, where you were in Cannes as well. Okay, so the practical case is that, let's say Storytech makes an ICO, never say never. And we get a lot of tokens and et cetera, and we want to cash out. Where can I do it? Because as to my knowledge, I think there is only Gibraltar, Switzerland, and then I have to go to the Israeli stock exchange, because I think that's one of the places where there is an ATM where you can actually convert blockchain to money. So how that process works, where I can get my money.
So
like
that's actually pretty straightforward. There's any number of exchanges that are around, and so in the States, a lot of people use Coinbase, for example. I'm not necessarily advertising or promoting Coinbase, but that's the attorney in me speaking. This is not an official endorsement of any product, but Coinbase is an exchange where you can turn your cryptocurrencies into dollars. But there are also other solutions that are able to provide, depending on if it's more of institutional type scenario or corporate-wide systems like that. And so actually part of what we're doing with our platform is building in integrations with different exchanges to make it very, very simple. So the creators or the rights holders don't have to go chasing down those tools to turn, let's say, the ether they're deposited into whatever local currency they need based on where they are. So we're actually putting together a pretty robust breakdown for that, depending on the size of the revenue that needs to be converted, because there are different partners and different solutions for that. But there are definitely a lot of solutions. Any country you're in the world, there's going to be an exchange that you can easily go to and use.
So did that DJ's 2 million convert into real money?
Well, that's all relative to how much he decided to cash out at a certain point. For example, Singular, when we did our token sale, right, we raised $7.5 million US dollars in 15 minutes.
Okay, I'm gonna tweet that.
2016 was a very exciting time. But we are a company and need to be smart about how we're using the funds that we've had, or at least our startup funds. So it wasn't just automatically, you manage that revenue as much as you want. If you're a rights holder and you need the revenue and the royalties from your film or your music's release, then you can very quickly transfer that into whatever local currency you need to pay rent. Or if you're running a campaign, you can easily convert whatever digital currency you have into fiat, so then you can then reinvest it into continuing to market the film using the insights you're getting from the data. Because not just what we're doing is providing real-time data, it's also near real-time payment of royalties and revenue to rights holders. So instead of waiting for a quarterly payment, you are getting paid near real-time. So the extra few steps that's required in order to convert that into whatever local currency you need, one, if it's going from iTunes or things like that, then you would have had to make some type of revenue or currency conversion at some point anyways. But what we're doing is just the added step of making that conversion. What we're really building and positioning around is that the added value of getting paid far faster than with traditional mechanisms outweighs the burden of an additional step.
Super. I'm going to start preparing that ICO right away.
Yeah,
Thank you, Jake.
Well, important, we don't do ICOs, we do token generation events. And we really focus on, media projects. There are tools for if you're going to go and launch a whole company. I wouldn't necessarily say that's what we're doing just yet.
We're going to talk about it later.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you very much.